Y'all are up awfully early for creative people. Thanks for being here. So I'm Van Tucker, and I'm going to talk about change. Or maybe I'm going to talk about rule breaking and change. See, at my age, you know a little bit about change. When I was in business school, we had to read a book on chaos theory. How many people know about quantum physics and business principles? I knew you would, James. Of course you would. I thought that was an insane assignment when I was in business school. But after reading chaos theory, I learned two really important principles. Number one, to deal with chaos or constantly, seemingly random change, adaptability and resourcefulness are a must. And sometimes adaptability and resourcefulness look a lot like rule breaking. So let me tell you my story, which I think is a story of change. My parents were conservative, hardworking Americans who only wanted to build a better life for their children. Part of the greatest generation, they were born during the Great Depression and frankly overcame odds and circumstances that many of us would require intensive therapy to get through. There was no adversity in my childhood. My parents loved us. They loved each other. They worked hard. We went to church every Sunday. My mother was a beautiful seamstress who sewed expensive drapes for country music stars. My father was an electrical engineer, just strong American middle-class values. My brothers and I had everything we needed: love, shelter, great role models for parents. My most significant memory of my father are his words, "Van, you can do anything you want to do if you want to do it bad enough." My respect for servant leadership and hard work is rooted in their example. So, the luxury of rebellion that I was afforded. And it is a luxury, don't forget that. My rebellious nature was influenced very early by Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I identified closely with Dolly. As a teen, I was a conservative parent's worst nightmare. I was curious, I was creative, I was always questioning the why of everything. I know one of my mother's most horrified moments was me sitting in a Sunday school class asking why God wanted me to be in church that day. I was fiercely independent. I was hell-bent on rule breaking. I was famous for breaking my curfew, getting grounded, and on the very day of my release, breaking my curfew again. Being grounded was a vicious cycle of my teen years. They finally got over it. My rebellious nature was further fueled by the culture in our country during the 60s and 70s. The sexual revolution, civil rights, everything was changing. That would have been bad. Excuse me. Everything was changing. All the rules were changing. They were all being broken to be able to allow that change. The war, Martin Luther King, those events were very influential to me. I made the decision, certainly against my parents. Y'all forgive my notes. I like to walk, and I can't do this without my notes, so just forgive me. I made the decision certainly against my parents' better wishes and something I regret frequently to not go to college. My generation was really the first to go to college on a wide scale. My parents, their siblings, most of my family didn't have the opportunity to go to college, and every one of my friends went to college. I wanted to work. I wanted to break the rules. I wanted to rebel. I wanted to experience the world in other ways. Wanting to tame my rebellion, I think, my mother asked our bank president neighbor to give me a job as a teller, thinking that it would calm me down a little bit. I will forever be grateful to Tom Locke for opening that door to me at the age of 18. This is what I thought I looked like, by the way, as a teller. I was loving my life. I was living it on my terms. I was working at a job that I loved, continuing to rage against the machine. Life was perfect. And then, at the age of 24, not unwanted, but rather unexpected, I became a mother to a wonderful son who's now 32 years old. And 13 short months later, gave birth to another son who was born 4 months premature. Now, if you've not been through that, that's a pretty intense experience. There's not much rebellion in premature birth, let me tell you. I am not a hater on people who choose not to have children. I think it's a very conscious decision that you should make. I didn't do that. But these two changed my life in ways that are just indescribable. A switch flipped. My parents became a lot smarter. And all I wanted was the best life for my boys that I could provide. My rebellion morphed into professional ambition. I was promoted to a secretary, and I went to work for a wonderful man named Fred James, who immediately recognized all of my questions as curiosity for learning. Fred was a very kind, gentle, enlightened man. He taught me not only the business of banking, but he really encouraged me to learn. And this was a great time of change in banking. The highest prime rate in the history of the United States. Who knows what the prime rate is right now? Anybody? It's okay. You can be creative and know what the prime rate is.
Is it 9?
It's about 3.5%. In the 80s, it was 21%. The highest rate in the history. And that brought forth some tremendous deregulation in banking. The big banks of today were born in the late 80s. That didn't exist until the late 80s. Well, so the 20 years that followed that, well, that gave a curious rebel with professional ambition the most perfect environment I could ask for. See, change sometimes creates chaos. The old rules don't apply, and people don't know how to deal with that. People really don't like change. And especially when there's no framework for change, when everything's kind of out the door. This was a time in banking when the old rules were just discarded. There were no rules, and new rules would be made up every day. Fred James's secretary would be my last traditional role in banking. I was given the very first and only personal computer, IBM XT, up there in the corner. Anybody seen one of those before? Yay, somebody's my age. That's great. It ran on DOS. There were operating manuals. I got Lotus 123 that I had to load onto the computer. So I had to learn DOS from a manual. There were no classes back then, by the way. Learn and load Lotus 123, and then on top of everything else, I had to teach everybody else how to do it. I served on the bank's R&D team for branch automation, helped conceptualize a new product for banking, not just our bank, for banking, called Bank at Work. I led the team that conceptualized and built the first mobile ATM truck in the world. The old rules were out. We were making them up as we went. I survived 7 bank mergers. I was the first woman at our bank to be afforded flex time. I wanted to be at home with my boys in the afternoon after school. So, armed with the first compact portable computer weighing in at a slight 28 pounds, I would pick my boys up from school. I would lug this, by the way, across Union Street to the parking lot. We didn't have to go to the gym. We could just carry those compact computers. I'd spend a little time with my boys after school, and then I'd work more after they went to bed. So what a great environment this was for someone like me who was curious and didn't want to be in a static environment. And I worked for some of the most amazing men in banking. There were really no female role models. There was one, her name was Cindy Powell, and she was considered a raging bitch by the men that we worked with because she was smart and assertive. Most of these men truly will go down as titans in the history of banking. But one, Bob Shell, had the greatest impact on me. Bob's Socratic method of management still influences me. Asking questions instead of just giving you the answer, that's really an art, and it always results in better outcomes. He taught me to be fearless through calculated risk-taking and critical thinking, or How to Rebel 101. He told me my greatest strength was not only the ability to see the vision, but to craft the change that would bring that vision to life. I was officially a change agent. So in 1994, after accomplishing things beyond my wildest dream, I was becoming bored, really. And I went to Bob and I asked him what was next for me. And what do you think he did? He turned that right back around on me and said, well, what do you want it to be? He pulled some strings and sent me to get my MBA at one of the top business schools in the country at the time, Vanderbilt. Have any Vandy grads in here? Yay, hey. Well, clearly, sent me to get my MBA and told me, come back with a business plan for what you want to do next at the bank. Clearly breaking the rule that you need an undergraduate degree to get a master's degree. I was so nervous and intimidated. My 50 classmates and professors were some of the smartest people in the world. I was a complete fraud, and I knew I was going to be found out quickly. It's one thing to take a risk and affect change when you have parents that will love you and shelter you, or mentors in your professional career that will make sure you don't fall too hard. But man, I felt completely naked in that crowd. There was nobody but me. What I didn't realize was that every one of them felt naked too. And authenticity was the only choice we had when we were together. Authenticity is really important when you're going through change. It brings out a vulnerability in yourself that opens your mind to every possibility. Stripped away is everything you've ever known. And the experience taught me that the value of creativity is paramount when dealing with change. See, to break the old rules, you have to create new rules that allow people to see the value of change. And creativity is all about building new rules. So while at Vandy, I researched a bunch of different industries, the healthcare industry, the automotive industry, the publishing industry. I was more confused than ever. One of my classmates was married to Brenda Lee's daughter. Who knows about Brenda Lee, Little Miss Dynamite? Good, good. And we were at lunch one day at Sunset Grill, and Brenda asked me, Van, what are you going to do when you graduate? And I told her, I said, I have no idea. I'm more confused than ever. Excuse me. And she said, why don't you think about the entertainment industry? There's only one banker that really does anything with the entertainment industry, and they don't do anything on a nationwide basis. Well, so from that fateful lunch, I put together a kick-ass business plan for a national entertainment industry group for Bank of America. We had offices in LA, New York, Nashville, Atlanta, and Miami. I've always loved music. I'm from Nashville, and so I've always understood the importance in our city, and it's always been important to me personally. Believe it or not, the music industry hasn't always been so highly valued in our community. And my proposal literally changed the way bankers approach the music industry. And not just in our city, but on a nationwide basis. I presented a well-researched, well-crafted business plan that was backed by critical thinking and calculated risk-taking, like I'd been taught, because bankers like that. My team took Martha Stewart Omnimedia public. We financed Michael Jackson's acquisition of the Beatles catalog. I met Quincy Jones and Chet Atkins. I curated the sculpture at the corner of 5th and Union downtown of Chet Atkins. He didn't like his shoes, by the way. I helped thousands of songwriters and musicians buy their first house, something that was not possible. By the way, every bank wants the music business now. New rules were created in order to change the old rules. Well, that led to the opportunity to be one of the original founders of Avenue Bank and the very first chief creative officer of any bank that I've ever heard of or have heard of since. I was really appreciative of that opportunity, for it really changed my life completely, but probably not for the reasons you might imagine. Barb Zapirian and I were two of the first female founders of a bank in the United States. I'm very proud of that. Frankly, I'm really proud of that broken rule. Avenue's taken a new and different approach to banking, changed customer expectations. What a concept. Be a resource as a bank. I'm pretty proud of that. As Chief Creative Officer, my team put together the whole brand of Avenue Bank. The look, the feel, the branches, everything. I'm certainly proud of that work. As you can imagine, it was really a dream come true. In others, it was the darkest nightmare in my life. See, again, I felt like a fraud. And I was asking myself, I don't know how to start a bank. What qualifications do I have to start a bank? What made it worse was that there were others, very publicly, I might add, that were asking that same question. What qualifies her to start a bank? That really fueled some insecurity. I wasn't really prepared to deal with that. The stress of flying without a net. My mentors, my classmates, my parents had all supported me, made me feel safe. I felt very alone and not very safe. I was in the grip of stress, and I left Avenue in 2008. I never blamed anyone but myself for that epic failure. I knew it was mine to own. I decided to spend the next 3 years focused on examining my true spirit, my behaviors, developing my self-awareness. I love this cartoon, by the way. You're an idiot. No, you're an idiot. Yes, I'm an idiot. Similar to how recovering addicts become addiction counselors, I became a Myers-Briggs master practitioner, the only one in Tennessee, by the way. During my career, I had always received comments like, you don't look like a banker, you don't talk like a banker, you don't act like a banker. And I always considered those the ultimate compliment. And the truth is, it was, when it was coming from my creative clients. When I would receive those comments from my peers in banking, they did not mean them as a compliment. Well, about this time, I met this man. My blood pressure goes down when he's in the room. He wooed me with pickup lines from Andy Griffith. And most of all, he taught me not to take myself too seriously. He laughs at me all the time, which in turn makes me laugh at myself more than anyone. Monty Holmes has taught me how to live a creative life. And so I surrendered to my love affair with creativity. And it's an underrated driver in our economy. The creative economy represents the backbone of our very existence here. And we're the only one of our peer cities without a coordinated strategy on the creative economy and retention. Something I hope Mayor Berry and Audra Ladd will change. Those who continue to or choose to be innovative, rule breakers, change agents, those are the people that change the world. They take us places we can't go on our own. Yet the balance of art and commerce is very tricky, but very necessary. Creative minds don't always understand the importance of business fundamentals. You have to create new rules to break the old ones because people don't like change. And many times business people are the most reluctant to change or to break the rules. You have to create new rules. But first, you have to convey the value of change. And many times, you have to convey it before it's visible or tangible. So during my quest, it became clear to me that my real talent and passion was to use my knowledge of business fundamentals to help creative people build businesses around their product or their idea. It's what I'd always loved about banking anyway, and working with creative people to help them understand business fundamentals. And so I started a consulting group around that very idea. And that's when I met Amanda Valentine. She was looking to do exactly that, and she introduced me to our talented fashion community. She also helped me see that unlike our healthcare industry or our music industry, our entrepreneur or tech community, there's really no infrastructure outside of New York or LA for our fashion community. They're just flying without a net all the time, trying to figure it out one day at a time. She also helped me learn something else very important. Creative people don't always do what they love for money. They're driven by a force much stronger than money. Passion for doing things differently, for doing things creatively. They're driven by rule breaking. But as I'd learned in my experience, it's really difficult to do that, to be a rule breaker, to be a change agent, to be an innovator without a net. It's really hard. Many of you are nodding your head because you know what I mean. So I deployed my critical thinking skills and kind of what I do best to help our fashion industry organize the Nashville Fashion Alliance. And I'm honored to serve this community of amazing people, rule breakers, risk takers. We're There's no shortage of creative talent. Nashville's greatest strength is that we know how to build communities. What differentiates us as a city, and I get asked that question all the time, by the way, is our willingness to collaborate, to think critically, to take calculated risks, to make change work. You know, that can even be disarming for people that move here. I have a very dear friend of mine that moved here, wasn't when he moved, but is now, moved here from LA. And he'll still tell you today that it was so disarming from him. He was coming from LA where the norm is, you know, you have to puff your chest out and tell everyone how fabulous you are. And so he moved here and didn't really kind of change that stance. You know, he just walked around telling everybody how great he was. And people were like, okay. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. I feel like Tony Robbins, by the way, I didn't mention it. So my friend, finally, I said to him, I said, hey, you know you don't need to do that here. People love you just because you're here. We don't care what you've accomplished. We don't care what you're going to do. We just want you to be real. And there's no chest puffing going on here. And he'll tell you today, that was really disarming for him at first. He thought it was an act. He thought we weren't being real about it. But it's absolutely true. The best way to get involved in this community and any of these communities is just do it. Because we are an open, collaborative community, and I'm convinced that it's our greatest strength. We are a center of creativity and commerce because of that one attribute. So you need to know I get on my soapbox when I talk about the creative economy, not just the fashion industry, although that's certainly a big focus, but our creative economy is what's built Nashville. I certainly appreciate the economic impact of large corporate relocations and sports teams. I know the numbers. I've helped, served on the teams that recruited a lot of those companies. I know what the numbers look like. And we need those kinds of economic incentives in our community. But the economy of small businesses, small creative businesses and startups is what has built our city. And investments and incentives in those type of businesses, as well as infrastructure like affordability and transportation, has got to be made if we are not to become homogenous Dallas or Atlanta. That old rule needs to be broken. And as a part of our NFA agenda, we're advocating for incentives for small creative businesses. So through the work of the NFA, we're creating some new rules so we can break the old ones. The fashion industry is very similar to the music industry in the 80s and 90s, for those of you that were around here then. It's fully entrenched in New York and Los Angeles, but it's currently experiencing tremendous disruption. The old rules just aren't working anymore. The talent is here. We have the largest concentration of independent fashion companies outside of New York and Los Angeles in this area. Sound familiar? It's what the music industry looked like in the 80s. We have the opportunity to affect great change in the fashion industry here, just as we've done in the music industry. Can you imagine Nashville without the music industry? Seriously. No. Without the work of music industry leaders in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we would not have that cohesive community focus here. And we're very inspired by how the music industry has built that infrastructure and focused on the balance of creativity and business. It's not just country music. There's an infrastructure here that's leveraged by musicians from all walks of life, from all statuses of the music business, from the biggest artists in the world to those you've never heard of. That infrastructure is here and it's accessible, where they can appropriately balance art and commerce. Without the infrastructure, these fashion companies are just flying without a net. And that's what the NFA is really about. If you want to see our fashion industry grow and thrive, I encourage you to consider membership in the NFA. You do not have to be a fashion company to benefit from being a member of the NFA. This is a thriving, creative community that's about as inclusive as any I've seen. We want to break some rules with you, so please consider becoming a member of the NFA. So, what have I learned about change from all this? Well, one thing I've learned is that I too am creative. I never thought of myself as creative. The innovators, the change agents, the rule breakers, the big thinkers, the dreamers, all of you. Well, that's my tribe. I love this quote from Seth Godin. I think it sums up really what I want you to hear today. Change-making happens when people fall in love with a different version of the future. You have to make some new rules, show the value of change before you can truly make change happen. So I was really nervous about coming here today. I've been to Creative Mornings before, and it was a big audience, and I knew y'all would I know who some of your previous speakers have been. It's really intimidating. So I was talking to my husband, and my husband said, Van, they've all come to hear you speak. They already love you. All you have to do is just give them that love right back. And so I do. I give it all right back to you. And thank you for allowing me to be with you today.